Have you ever felt the weight of silence more than words? You didn't yell. You didn't explain. You just went quiet, and somehow, that silence did more damage than any confrontation ever could. We've been taught wrong. We're told that to be strong in a relationship, we have to speak up, chase, fix, prove. But what if I told you that strength isn't always loud? What if silence, intentional and unwavering, is not just a response but a revolution? You've probably heard the lie. If they're not texting, they don't care. If they've moved on, it means they're happy. And here's the trap. Most people believe it. But the truth is far more complex, and much more powerful. In Stoic relationships, your stillness isn't avoidance. It's clarity. It's self-respect forged through pain. And what looks like you doing nothing is actually everything. Because here's the thing. While they pretend fine, while they smile for the gram and laugh too loudly in crowded rooms, something else is happening underneath. Something they can't show. Your silence, your complete, unshaken calm, is speaking directly to the part of them that still needs answers. It's hitting places they thought they buried. Why? Because silence removes the mask. It doesn't play the game. It calls their bluff. And if you've ever wondered whether your absence means anything, stay right here. Because this isn't about revenge, it's about evolution. This is about using silence the way a sculptor uses space, to reveal what was hidden all along. By the end of this, you'll understand not just why your silence is affecting them, but how it's the most dignified, most stoic move you could have made. And as we break this down, step by step, ask yourself, what if the most powerful thing I could ever say is nothing at all? Let's begin. 1. Your absence rewrites the narrative. What happens when you stop showing up? Not just physically or digitally, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. When the calls go unanswered, the texts go unread, and the breadcrumb trails fade to silence, you're doing something more profound than ghosting. You're disrupting the entire story they were comfortable writing, one where they held the pen. It's more than a response, it's a rewrite. Think back to the moment you realized the messages no longer mattered, the effort didn't shift the dynamic, and the chase felt like self-erasure. That moment arrived not because she whispered hurtful words, but because you absorbed too many. You realized the power wasn't in being present, it was in being seen on your own terms. So you stopped. You paused. And in that pause, everything shifted. What do you imagine she thought as the silence began? Did she expect an apology? A frantic "Why?" Or did she bank on the idea that your ego, or your feelings, would break before the month ended? Most do. But those who choose detachment know this. Not reacting isn't weakness. It's ownership. Here's what absence does to the narrative. It removes the predictable. It yanks the script out of someone else's control and pronounces a new director. She may have planned the dramatic finale, an emotional collapse, a plea for forgiveness, or even a public showdown to reclaim validation. But instead, you redirected the story. No explosions, no tears, no trailer of upcoming drama. Just silence. Just the slow fade of your consistent presence. Silence is jarring. It's not neutral. In relationships, silence is the loudest signal you can send. It's the void that interrupts the scene, causing her to rewind, replay, reassess. She's left with questions louder than any confession you could make. Does he mean it? Did he just move on? Maybe he never felt that deeply? Or the harsher question, what did I lose? When your energy becomes quiet, others start to listen. They look for the shift. They scan old photos, review dated texts. They predict your habits, story posts, morning greetings, texting about the little things. And now that those habits are gone, your absence is rewriting the narrative, even if she doesn't want to acknowledge what's changing. What if, in Stoic relationships, the most radical act isn't the chase but the stillness? What if refusing to explain becomes the most eloquent statement? That's what you're offering, not clarity through words, but clarity through elimination. You're stripping away the noise, the drama, the emotional theatrics. You're demonstrating a level of self-respect so unwavering it doesn't need explanation. It just stands there, solid, silent, unmoved. And as the silence stretches, you'll notice her behavior shifting. Not necessarily in direct messages or aggressive comments, but in subtler ways, liking old photos as if testing the waters. Glancing at your stories behind the scenes. Possibly declining to delete your number, even though they claim they're ready to move on. Because deep down, no matter how loud they pretend, no matter how many captions they write to prove they're okay, your absence unsettles them because it breaks their script. Their version of the story depended on your predictable reaction. They expected drama. They expected sorrow or outrage, an emotional speech, or a pitiful plea. But you didn't give any of that. You opted into silence. And silence is mysterious. Silence is potent. Silence is the blank canvas where every feeling they have now gets sketched: worry, regret, shame, even longing. And none of that demands explanation. Silence is the question mark. The uncertainty. The lingering thought echoing in their mind at 2 a.m., when they realize maybe they didn't actually know the story they thought they were writing. Your absence isn't temporary. It's not a silent protest. It's a boundary. You aren't holding out for something from them. You're holding steady for yourself. That's what shifts the narrative, from emotional exhaustion and repeated breakdowns to quiet sovereignty. That's what transforms chaos into calm growth. Everything in Stoicism points to it. Respond with virtue, not volatility. And in relationships, that often means responding with silence, not supply. Ask yourself, when you disappear without explanation, what narrative forms in her absence? What does she fill the space with? The mind is a storyteller. Left unfilled, it will produce somber, regret-fueled sequels. In Stoic relationships, leaving space is never a hiatus, it's a transformation. So ask yourself, are you ready to interrupt the unhealthy cycle of chase and collapse? Are you willing to let your absence be the rewrite, the new chapter, the more peaceful ending? Because if she doesn't see your value in your presence, she will feel it in your void. And she will ask the questions that matter, not to her audience or her friends, but to herself. In that silence, your energy is saying, I don't chase someone who disappeared. I don't explain myself to someone who demanded drama. I don't shrink to fit someone else's narrative. I exist on my own terms. That alone changes the storyline. That alone flips the power. That alone rewrites everything she thought the ending would look like. 2. Peace disturbs the performers. Think about a time when someone in your life thrived on the emotional chaos you absorbed. They might have pulled away, created drama, or tested your limits, assuming you'd crumble, chase, or plead. That storm they brewed? They expected you to walk right into it. But what if instead you brought peace? Peace isn't passive. It's not resignation or indifference. Peace is deliberate. It's the unwavering calm that remains when everyone else expects fireworks. It's not missing their calls, it's choosing not to call them back. It's not ignoring their drama, it's refusing to feed it. That kind of detachment may feel unnatural at first, but once you understand Stoicism, the art of maintaining inner tranquility regardless of external storms, you realize how potent peace really is. When they perform, faking strength or flaunting independence, they're still depending on you to react. They need your engagement to validate the show. But when your response is silence, you don't just end the show. You rewrite the dynamics. Their performance crumbles because it no longer serves a purpose. Peace becomes the disruptor. It reveals the gaps they work so hard to hide. How many times have you seen someone pretend to be fine, only to crumble when you respond with calm detachment? They huff and puff, toss out passive-aggressive posts, or go silent again, but it rarely works. Their facade starts cracking under your quiet, steady presence. Peace doesn't yell, it seeps in and unmasks everything. Silence removes their control. It makes them realize their performance isn't fooling anyone, not really. This is the paradox of Stoic relationships. Emotional equilibrium unsettles emotional manipulators. In the absence of drama, their drama becomes pointless. And they struggle to perform with no audience. Their value rests on your reaction. Without it, their energy dissipates. And no matter how hard they try to maintain that perfect mask or scripted responses, without your emotional ammo, the performance withers. Now, imagine this scenario. She posts pictures of herself looking happy, perhaps a little defiant, captioning it as though she's moved on. She expects you to scroll, react, comment, maybe even message privately. But you don't. What does that silence feel like to her? It's the very thing she didn't anticipate. It's the piece that disturbs the performative piece she's projecting. Because deep down, she wanted that confirmation you were still watching, still caring. You simply swapped the red carpet for stillness, and she didn't know how to walk on that. This isn't about playing games or warping someone's perception. It's about refusing to feed into toxic dynamics. In Stoicism, we learn that responding with virtue, clearly defined values, supersedes reacting to volatility. And when you apply that to relationships, you declare, I will not supply chaos. I will not validate manipulation. I choose my own trajectory, calmly, without your noise. Ask yourself, when someone's performance used to throw you off, how long before you realized that response only fed the beast? How many arguments, dramatic episodes, and exhausting closures did you endure before recognizing that your emotional reactivity was perpetuating the cycle? What if the way to truly break free was quiet resilience, not volume? Because peace isn't a silencing, it's a choice. It's choosing to live by principle even when it feels natural to step into the arena. It's choosing clarity over confusion, substance over spectacle. It's knowing that when they expect fireworks, you'll choose a mirror instead, to reflect exactly what they brought. And in that moment, the mirror breaks their illusion. You are not an audience member, you're the one walking away. As their performance starts to crack, they'll scramble. Maybe they post again. Maybe they message, everything okay? Or the subtler approach, liking your content in hopes it triggers a response. All signs they crave validation. But there's nothing for them here. Peace, in Stoicism and in Stoic relationships, is not a cycle, it's freedom. Freedom from drama, validation, emotional manipulation. And each time you refuse to react, you reinforce that freedom. Here's another question. Have you ever noticed how quickly emotional manipulators return to calm once they lose emotional supply? They're primed to create storms, not survive them. Your silence is the shelter they didn't expect. It's not a cage, they can leave any time. But without an audience, the performance means nothing. And when the stage clears, they're left with themselves. And maybe, just maybe, they'll do something real with that quiet. Pause and consider, is your presence predicated on their performance, or is your absence predicated on your peace? Because in Stoic relationships, your emotional sovereignty is non-negotiable. You don't tiptoe back into drama just because it's familiar. You don't apologize just to restore peace. You don't respond just to make them comfortable. You keep your peace because it's yours to keep. Yes, it's difficult, especially when they keep pushing, drawing, creating the noise you're painfully used to, expecting to pull you back in. But as Stoicism teaches us, virtue lies in self-control, in reasoned detachment, in choosing your principles over your passions. Peace isn't the absence of activity, it's the active choice to preserve your emotional integrity. That's where real transformation happens. Because once you choose peace over reaction, you're effectively breaking the cycle. You're showing that stability doesn't require performance, that respect isn't negotiable, and that emotional investment need not be conditional. You become the standard, and peace becomes your signature. Do you feel that clarity yet? Notice how every time they try to bait you into performance, your peace is the refusal, and that refusal starts to destabilize them. Not to punish them, but to protect yourself. And with each refusal, your sense of self sharpens. Your purpose strengthens. Your Stoic relationships become not about chaos, but about consistent alignment with values. Now, if you've learned something in this moment, if you feel that clarity, that peace isn't weakness, but power, then pause that video and do this. Hit the like button and comment, number 1, right now. and subscribe so we can keep exploring how Stoicism shapes not just our relationships, but our entire lives. Because when you choose quiet over collapse, transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable. 3. Scarcity elevates your value. What if value isn't measured by presence, but by absence? We live in a world conditioned to equate attention with affection. Want someone to care? Give them your time. Want someone to notice? Flood them with messages. But in the realm of Stoic relationships, attention isn't proof of value, it's a resource. And when it becomes scarce, its impact intensifies. Consider this: you were always there, morning greetings, supportive replies, comforting presence. She knew you'd be there because you wanted to be. She took for granted that consistency. But consistent presence can breed complacency. When value becomes predictable, you stop being extraordinary, you become expected. That's the paradox. Availability can lower your worth just by becoming expected. In psychology, there's a concept called hedonic adaptation. When something good becomes routine, you stop noticing it. Applying that to relationships, when your kindness, reliability, and attention flow without pause, they blend into the background. They lose their shine. However, when you step back, when those gestures disappear, you shift from background music to the solo spotlight. Suddenly, those morning texts aren't calming, they're missed. Those subtle gestures aren't routine, they're irreplaceable. Scarcity doesn't manufacture value, it reveals it. Ask yourself, how often did she appreciate your presence without qualification? When you were there, did she notice? Or did she automatically rely on you being dependable? The answer often surfaces not in comfort, but in absence. When silence enters, appreciation wakes up. In Stoicism, scarcity isn't about playing games, it's about saving your energy for when it is valued. It's discipline. It's refusing to dilute your worth by overstaying in someone else's life when your contribution isn't recognized. Remember, the Stoic never clings to what refuses to grow with them. And presence without reciprocity is exactly that, a stagnant exchange. Now, imagine this scenario. After weeks of silence, you reappear, not dramatic, not apologetic, simply present with clarity. She sees a man who could disappear and reappear on his terms, not hers. She sees the marker of boundaries. She sees that presence isn't granted, it's earned. That shift reframes how she sees you. You're no longer the available safety net, you're the prize. That changes everything: attraction, respect, curiosity. She starts wondering, how did I take that for granted? Scarcity didn't create the value, but it forced clarity. By choosing scarcity, you reclaim your emotional sovereignty. You stop casting pearls before swine. You stop investing where it isn't appreciated. You stop offering your emotional presence as rent-free lodging. And that shift doesn't just change her perception, it changes yours. You stop identifying your worth by how much you give. You start defining it by how you allow others to engage, and on what terms. Consider this: if she sends a message after weeks of silence, does your heart jump? It shouldn't. Not because you don't care, but because you're no longer tethered to her validation. You respond, or don't, based on your peace and purpose, not on instinctive need. Scarcity also introduces uncertainty, and humans need certainty. When someone is always present, their presence loses power. But scarcity reintroduces mystery. When she wonders when or if you'll show up, that uncertainty carries weight. That weight jars attention, redirects focus, sparks reflection. And general Stoicism reminds us that detachment is not cruelty, it's clarity in action. You might be wondering, how does scarcity differ from distance driven by resentment? It's intentional absence, not punitive exile. It's emotional discipline, not silent rebellion. You're not withdrawing because you're hurt, you're making space to heal and to thrive. You're not hiding, you're prioritizing. And that's the distinction Stoicism teaches: absence powered by purpose, not by pride or pain. As your absence continues, she might adjust. Perhaps she reflects and reaches out. Perhaps she doesn't. But in each case, your value doesn't diminish, Because Stoic relationships aren't built on reaction, they're built on resilience. Your worth exists independently of external validation. Have you noticed how people suddenly praise and acknowledge your value once you step back? That's scarcity in action. Small efforts now become significant. Small gestures now mean more. And that shift, from big impact to even bigger void, reveals the depth of your presence. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about steady consistency. And now, missing it is proof. In the classical Stoic perspective, scarcity is a tool of self-mastery. You control what you give, when you give, and why. You don't withhold affection to manipulate. You choose emotional autonomy to preserve integrity. Your peace isn't up for sale. And that is immeasurably attractive. Scarcity also becomes a lesson in demand. In modern terms, you don't need to fight for attention. You need only withhold it until it's respectably offered. Doing so draws lines. It teaches without shouting. It communicates boundaries without aggression. It reinforces your standards without friction. Ask yourself, was your previous presence conditional on their appreciation? Did you shrink, chase, or explain to try to earn your place? If so, scarcity might be your answer. Because when presence is transactional, it dims. When it is sovereign, it shines. Over time, this becomes a virtuous cycle. The more you preserve your value, the more valuable you feel. The more valuable you feel, the more likely you are to preserve it. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. Alignment with self-respect. Alignment with clarity. Alignment with growth. And so value becomes not a prize to be chased, but a state to uphold. Not conditional on their reception, but rooted in your resolve. In Stoic relationships, value isn't earned by proving, it's expressed through steady adherence to principles, through self-grounded presence and purposeful absence. Let me ask again, what happens when someone finally sees your absence alone isn't emptiness, it's self-respect? What happens when that realization shifts their awareness? Because scarcity doesn't force love, it invites it. It doesn't demand attention, it reawakens it. And it doesn't manufacture attraction, it reveals it. This is the pivot from being available to being desirable. Because in your absence, value awakens, not by seeking attention, but by honoring your own. So let scarcity be your refinement. Let silence be your statement. Let absence be your affirmation. And let your presence, when chosen, be worth its weight in gold. 4. They fake strength. You showed it. From the very start, they mastered the art of performance. The well-timed smile, the "I'm fine" replies, the passive posts designed to look carefree. They built an image of resilience. It's the classic mask, shows strength to hide guilt, pain, or uncertainty. And in that mask, their world seems complete, no room for regret, no trace of vulnerability. But masks never last. They crack. And your silence is the pressure. When someone pretends to be fine, they hope you'll respond. They expect confirmation that the facade is working, through direct messages, emojis, a reply to their content. They measure success by your reaction. But when nothing comes, the mask stops being protective, it becomes suffocating. And that's where true strength shows. Not in pretending to be unbothered, but in withholding validation from a show that demands it. Consider this, you remember exactly what broke your resolve. That false assurance in her tone. That tiny stab of betrayal when she pulled back. That first time you realized actions spoke louder than words. She didn't post a goodbye message or send a spiteful text, she just faded. Maybe she pretended to be okay by talking to someone else, maybe she laughed in stories that weren't yours. But you felt it. You felt the shift. And instead of chasing shadows, you chose silence. That's real strength, not loud, not explosive, but composed. She won't broadcast her cracks. Not at first. She'll double down. More posts, more stories, more meticulously curated content. Her energy won't fade, it'll intensify. She'll hail her own independence as if your absence is a badge of triumph, because she still expects validation. But when it doesn't come, the mask begins to push back. That curated smile hardens in photos. That "I'm fine" tone feels sharper in private messages. Your silence is asking, is that really all there is? And here's the truth, your silence forces clarity. It transforms the performative strength into a vulnerability they can't display. Because you're not chasing. You're not reacting. You're not explaining. You simply exist outside of her narrative flow. That makes you unpredictable, and unpredictable is ungovernable. That makes your strength real, rooted in self, not in performance. It takes courage to let someone keep their mask while you stand silently beside it, refusing to hand them any tools to use it. It takes confidence to let content slide, to ignore superficial gestures meant to coax you back. It takes clarity to trust that your genuine presence and integrity don't need amplification through reaction. In Stoic relationships, real strength isn't performing, it's letting go of the need to prove. The longer she wears the mask without receiving the expected payoff, your reaction, the more it weighs on her. And all this without a showdown. No drama. No confrontation. No force. Just your unwavering lack of supply and your completeness in absence. As Stoicism teaches, action resides not in what you do, but in what you don't do. In restraint. In choosing yourself over performance. So ask yourself, have you ever caught yourself needing to respond just to prove you cared? Have you ever felt the urge to unmask her by showing up emotionally? Because each time you choose silence instead, you're stating that strength is not in reaction, but in restraint. It's not in chasing a performance, it's in letting it unravel on its own. Your strength isn't measured by how often you show up, it's by what you allow to fade. It's defined by the boundaries you keep, and the stories you refuse to fuel. It's defined by Stoic relationships built on inner alignment, not outer applause. When you refuse to validate a show, you force a reckoning. Who are they beyond the mask? And sometimes, they'll crumble. Maybe not in public, but in private. Maybe she'll text, "Are you okay?" Because even a vague inquiry signals guilt, uncertainty, or regret. Or maybe she'll avoid it and continue performing, yet her posts lack confidence. Her words stumble. Without your supply, her mask begins to disintegrate. You didn't break her, it was the truth behind the mask. This kind of strength is sustainable. It isn't fueled by spite or anger. It grows from self-awareness, self-respect, and self-control. It doesn't need to elevate you over someone else. It simply elevates you above the instinct to chase validation. And when she sees it, even from a distance, she wonders, what kind of man doesn't need a reaction? What kind of calm is unshakable, even in absence? Now I want you to pause and feel that clarity. Feel how strength doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers, "I'm fine, with or without this." If you're resonating with this, if you've ever chosen silent strength over emotional spectacle, then do this now. Smash that like button, comment, number 1, below, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss the rest of this exploration into Stoic relationships and Stoicism in general. Your presence here matters, and your journey toward deeper emotional sovereignty continues. 5. Stillness creates curiosity, then regret. In the silence that follows your withdrawal, a quiet curiosity begins to take shape. It isn't loud or dramatic, it's a slow-burning question that echoes in solitude. Why hasn't he reached out? Over time, that curiosity grows roots. It anchors into late-night thoughts, solitary scrolling through old messages, and moments when you're unexpectedly missed. Stillness is not empty, it's compelling. And that compulsion unsettles them, even when they pretend otherwise. Think of stillness not as absence, but as a subtle signal, a presence that exists without being present. It's the invisible current that pulls them into their own memories. When your words stop, your influence doesn't. Every happy anniversary post, every seemingly triumphant vacation story, they're all a deliberate creation, meant to fill the void your silence left. But in that void, real emotion starts to surface. Genuine questions, unfiltered reflections. Have you ever replayed an old conversation, thinking, "If only I'd said this"? That's stillness working its influence. It creates reflection because it gives no direct feedback, no push for reconciliation, no invitation to explain. It offers space instead. Space for better memories to rise. Space for vulnerability to re-emerge amid the mask of performance. Space for regret to seep in. It isn't about sending a message, it's about creating a pause. And in that pause, the mind begins to fill in details. The jokes you shared, the quiet moments of understanding, the simplicity of a connection uninterrupted by drama. Those fragments grow more vivid when there's silence, because nothing competes with them. Not arguments. Not social media noise. Just pure recollection. And that remembrance is what often leads to regret. Regret isn't about longing, it's about perspective. It's the sudden clarity that maybe the performance didn't change how rare your presence really was. Maybe the emotional storm she brewed meant something to you, even if you didn't pursue it. Regret awakens not because silence is loud, it's not, but because absence fosters perspective. And once perspective arrives, uncertainty and curiosity follow. You don't force this. You don't guarantee it. But you trigger it through proportional dignity. In Stoicism, you understand that clarity isn't manufactured, it's allowed. You step away not to punish, but to preserve. The silence is your boundary, your tool, your refuge. But in giving her that distance, you also give her clarity. She sees the gaps she created, the moments she overlooked, the space she filled with ego performances. And in quiet, those gaps echo louder than any argument ever could. Curiosity often arrives in small signs, liking an old photo, a private text saying, "Hope you're well," or a fleeting story view when you didn't expect it. These aren't admissions of remorse, they're signals of reflection. They show she's reconsidering. That she's measuring her present against your past. You didn't push her, they pressed pause on themselves. That's stillness echoing. Regret, when it surfaces, isn't explosive. It's slow. Few people crave emotional closure as much as they dread emotional reckoning. It's easier to distract yourself with new stories, new attention, new validation. But the stillness you created remains unfilled. And at some point, the mind stops scrolling and starts assessing. That's your silence working. Stillness also recalibrates expectations. When someone realizes you won't chase them, they begin to question why they expected you to. When they observe your continued calm, they wonder what they missed. When they see your growth as independent of them, they notice how much they're still tied emotionally to what you represented. And that realization can unearth regret, of missed moments, untreated conflict, unspoken appreciation. This is where clarity intersects with choice. You didn't berate her. You didn't dramatize leaving. You simply remained steadfast in your absence, and that absence forced her to question. In Stoic relationships, clarity is king. Stillness is the gateway. And regret is the echo. Now ask yourself, how do you act when someone finally expresses regret in silence? Do you rush back into emotion? Do you validate it instantly? Or do you observe, deliberate, and protect your self-worth? Because by creating that curiosity and choice, you also create opportunity for authentic reconnection, or graceful finality. The path forward is yours, defined by value, not by emotional reaction. In this space, your stoicism shines. You don't exploit regret for leverage. You don't punish for past absence. You don't engage unless it aligns with your growth. Silence brought clarity. That clarity gives you options. That's emotional power. Stillness doesn't guarantee regret. Nothing can. But it guarantees reflection. And reflection is a doorway to accountability, transformation, resolution. In Stoic relationships, that doorway is yours to guard. Your presence shouldn't be a consolation prize. And your absence shouldn't be a manipulation tactic. Both are tokens of integrity. Stillness created curiosity. Regret may follow. But regardless, your decision to engage or walk away is rooted not in impulse, but in purposeful clarity. If your silence has ever made someone look back, pause, or reconsider, know that's evidence not of cruelty, but of conviction. That's your peace working, your boundaries speaking, your inner growth echoing outward. And it's everything you set out to uphold. 6. Your growth becomes the real closure. Growth reveals what closure cannot. When you embrace the silence and choose self-evolution over chasing explanations, your journey transforms into the most powerful form of closure, not just for you, but for her too. In every step you take away from the noise, you rebuild your identity on solid ground, not on shifting emotions. You once believed closure meant confrontation, a final confrontation, a message demanding answers, a forceful resolution. But Stoicism teaches that understanding replaces confrontation, and transformation replaces confrontation. By choosing growth, you crowned yourself, not with revenge, but with resilience. You didn't disappear to punish her, you disappeared to rediscover yourself. Growth shows up in your mornings before sunrise when you exercise discipline before she thinks of you. It shows up in late-night hours spent learning new skills, reflecting on purpose, or reading a Stoic text rather than replaying old conversations. It shows up in boundaries hardened by consistency, integrity built in silence, and confidence rooted in competence, not validation. Imagine she checks your social media and sees your posts, unfiltered snapshots of a life lived willingly and purposefully. Maybe she sees you laugh with friends, dive into work with conviction, or meditate in solitude with peace on your face. She expects drama, but instead sees growth. That dissonance pierces deeper than any breakup rant could. Ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized growth without posting about it, or proving it to anyone? In Stoic relationships, the work isn't for likes, it's for lasting transformation. And that transformation radiates even in silence. Others sense it. So does she. Consider this: several weeks ago, she left a comment, something small like, "Hope all is well." Simple, casual. But it referenced a version of you she missed, the one who still cared, still engaged. You could have replied, restarting the old rhythm, the performative dance. But instead, you showed a brief acknowledgement and kept building. You gave enough to demonstrate civility, not enough to reignite dependency. That moment of calm response, shaped by growth, spoke louder than emotional outpouring ever could. Growth doesn't demand an audience. It's not a performance for others to consume. It's internal, slow, and continuous. But its signals aren't invisible, they're felt. They're known. And when she senses them, not in your texts, but in your composure, your clarity, it disrupts her narrative once again. That's not control, it's presence shaped by progress. Over time, that ripple effect becomes undeniable. Old stories fade. The urge to rekindle fizzles. And in place of emotional closure, there's acceptance accompanied by self-evidence. She may wonder why you're different now. But even that curiosity is powerless because you are complete in your growth. Your growth also guards against the trap of reopening old wounds. When someone reaches out, even briefly, the old temptation to explain may appear. But your transformation is your guard. You know what you deserve. You don't need to remind her. You don't need to justify the distance. You just live, and let your growth speak for itself. Ask yourself, if she never responds, would you still finish your book, still build your dream, still strengthen your peace? The answer is yes. That's the true language of growth. It's a statement of self-priority that doesn't seek reciprocation. It's Stoicism in action. Focus on what you can control, let go of what you can't, and always invest in your inner fortress. Because growth isn't the end, it's the path forward. When she sees growth in your balance, calm, and progress, she experiences a form of closure without drama. But even more than that, you experience closure in knowing you've cared for yourself first. You don't need explanations to feel peace. You don't need validation to feel worthy. You aren't incomplete, you're evolving. If this resonates, if you've ever felt peace emerge from progress, then pause here, hit the like button, comment, number 1, below. And be sure to subscribe to keep uncovering the power of Stoic relationships and Stoicism in everyday life. Your growth is your message, and it's one worth sharing. They pretend they're fine. They carry on as if your absence is nothing more than a momentary lapse, a space to be easily filled. But you know the truth. You know the silence you've maintained isn't void, it's purpose. You know that, in every moment the phone stays silent, in every notification left unseen, your stillness rings louder than any conversation ever could. This conclusion isn't an ending, it's an affirmation. You've completed a cycle not marked by chaos or confrontation, but by transformation, clarity, and inner strength. You began this journey by learning to reclaim your narrative. You discovered that your absence isn't a retreat, but a redesign, a way to rewrite the conclusion they rehearsed, to dismantle the script they held so tight. In the process, you exposed the hollowness behind their performances and released yourself from the suffocation of unwanted attention. Slowly, and with unwavering discipline, you planted the seeds of change. Each moment of silence a step toward sovereignty. Then you chose peace over performance, shattering expectations and illuminating the impossibility of sustaining a show without your reaction. You became the calm that unsettles, the mirror that reveals, the presence that doesn't need presence to prove power. Your silence wasn't rejection, it was resistance. Resistance to chaos, to control, to emotional manipulation. And in resisting, you reclaimed peace. When your disappearance elevated your presence, you learned the value of scarcity, not as a trick, but as an expression of integrity. You demonstrated that value isn't how often you're available, it's how you choose to be available. You reminded yourself, and her, that a man's worth isn't found in his constant returns, but in the discretion of his presence. You redefined value through emotional autonomy, choosing scarcity to preserve, not punish. Within the envelope of that scarcity, their performance cracked. The mask of strength fractured, unable to sustain itself without your validation. And you watched it unravel, not to gloat, but to witness integrity enforced by inaction. In Stoic relationships, sometimes the most profound strength is invisible strength, carried quietly, resisted purposefully, and held unshakably. Your stillness then sparked curiosity, and curiosity sparked reflection. In the quiet, she began questioning her choices, her silence, her delivery. She looked back, at shared memories, missed conversations, and the way you once showed up. She wondered, why didn't he reach out? Or, did I really let that fade? That's the power of stillness. It opens the door to emotional honesty without saying a word. It forces perspective. And perspective can lead to regret, or to acceptance. Both are truths clothed in clarity. But stillness is not about forcing outcomes, it's about freeing yourself. You stood in the quiet and chose to grow. You chose self-improvement over emotional security. You chose discipline over reaction. You chose clarity over closure. That choice, sustained long after the story seemed written, became the ultimate form of closure. Not for her, but for yourself. Because growth defined you, not loss. Progress became your identity, not pain. You didn't disappear to hurt, you evolved to heal. Now, at this moment, you stand complete. In your silence, in your stillness, in your strength, you have discovered freedom. This conclusion isn't delivered through drama. It's lived through change. You've learned that actions, not words, carry weight. That absence, when rooted in respect for self, forms the foundation for respect from others. That strength, when uncolored by chaos, is unmistakable. So release any need to explain, to justify, to revive what's already transpired. The path forward is defined not by returning to what was, but by moving toward who you're becoming. Embrace the quiet confidence that says, I don't chase. I create. I don't collapse. I rise. Let this understanding guide you in every interaction, every choice, every moment you're tested by silence, or tempted by drama. Because in Stoic relationships, silence is neither weapon nor shield, it's a declaration of self. And in living that declaration, something transformative happens. Affection no longer demands your presence. Respect no longer floats on attention. And healing no longer waits for permission. You've completed this story not by chasing an ending, but by becoming the man who no longer needs one. You are the narrative. You are the clarity. You are the peace. And that, more than any dramatic crescendo, is the final note. Thank you for staying with me throughout this journey of silence, strength, and stoic growth. Remember, as you move forward, your silence is sovereignty, your growth is glory, and your peace is proof. Until next time, stay grounded. Let your silence speak. And let your spirit shine through every echo of stillness.